Hey everyone, I'm Dan Rusk, CTO at Thorn Technologies, and today I'm going to be talking about the AWS CLI. And first, I have a shameless plug here. S3 Gateway is a product we work on that is in the AWS Marketplace and now the Azure Marketplace, thanks Rob. And it's mostly a command line oriented system running on Linux to allow people to SFTP files to S3. So this gives them a familiar interface to securely transfer files that will make it to S3. And that's the idea behind it. So AWS has three interfaces that all really communicate with one API. There's the console, the command line interface, and then software development kits. The one we're going to talk about today is the command line interface. And we'll go into the console a tiny bit just to confirm everything's working. And then the software development kits are, for programming languages. They have them in most programming languages. You just have to go to AWS and find them. So the CLI, I'm not going to go into the details of how to install it because it's different for every machine. So you're just going to have to read the manual here. But on the Mac, you can just do brew install AWS CLI. And if you check out these docs here, it'll walk you through that process. The CLI runs on top of Python versions 2.7 or 3.6, either one's fine, or higher. And we're also going to use S3 today, which is an object-based storage. Now first, I actually wanted to show you, I did some editing on these slides, so it jumps right away. The CLI is already installed on this machine, so if I try to execute it, you just do AWS, and it'll show you some usage options right away, like any other command line. And if you run the help, you can see it has some pretty robust help to help you out with your queries. But just like any other command line, just reading these man pages or just these help pages are meant for reference, and they're not going to help you actually get started. So I'm going to help you get started today. With the user guide, you can go through the user guide and get started, but I'm going to help you out here. One thing you'll notice is that this CLI right now is not set up. This is how it will be pretty much when you install it yourself. It'll say you need to configure your CLI. And I haven't done that yet. I'm going to later on in this. I just want to show you the interface first. So S3 is a part of AWS that allows you to store files in an unlimited fashion. So S3 is an object-based storage, which means as opposed to a file system storage, you can't just access random bytes in S3. When you update an object, you're actually replacing the entire object. It also doesn't really have the concept of folders, though it kind of fakes it for you, which we'll talk about later. That's not necessary now. So S3 is highly durable and available. So it has 11 nines of durability. And what does that mean? It means if you gave AWS or Wasabi, as of course one, 1 million files to store, statistically they would lose one file every 659,000 years. And so you are about 411 times more likely to get hit by a meteor. I like that comparison. It's from David Friend from his blog here. But it just points out how your files are pretty much always going to be there on S3, and then you can do even more to secure the durability of your files by then replicating your file to another S3 bucket. So if you have your file in two places on S3, then there's pretty much no way you're going to lose your file. And then the other side, your file has to be there, but then you also have to be able to access your file. AWS has 4 nines of availability for accessing your file. That's about 1 hour per year of downtime. And the largest, most recent disruption that really personally affected me was due to a typo when one of the software engineers was typing in a command that took down all of US East 1 region. And that was back in February 2017. So you can read more about that, the write-up from AWS about what happened here, and then you can find a bunch of blog posts about it that describe how much money was lost during that by all these companies that didn't properly prepare. And yeah, it's a very interesting case study, in my opinion. It got me really into actually replicating to other regions, so I wouldn't have this situation happen again where we couldn't access our data.
My favorite outcome about that whole thing is Amazon's response was, here's a new feature for AWS S3, automatic replication.
Yeah, just you just have to put a checkbox now, and it'll take it to a different region.
Another region, yeah. So they took a money-losing opportunity and made it a money-making opportunity.
Yeah. Our clients at the time were like, we don't want to not have access to our files. They're like, okay, you can copy to another system and pay twice as much. They're like, yes. Amazon actually came out on top on this. So
somehow.
Yeah, that's how they work. So. Let's go back to the presentation. So yeah, S3 is a great place to store your files, but it also has other powers that we'll go into at the by the end of this presentation. We'll have created an actual website that's hosted on S3, which is pretty cool and cheap and easy to do. So I'm going to actually do a demo where we are going to take a picture as a group, and then I'm going to give my CLI, configure it with access to S3, and then upload the picture to S3. I guess the streamers will be able to see this too. It's exciting. I'm going to hold up my I'm not going to take a picture of just me because that would be kind of weird. Anyone have a preference of filter or anything? I was going to do the comic book filter.
Comic book's good.
All right.
Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, no one getting there. Okay.
All right.
Whoa.
Oh. And it sounds,
There we go. Nice and unclear. Okay. So I took a picture. I'm going to put it on my desktop. And then just give it a new name. Alright, so I want to put that picture on S3, but I need a place for it to go. And we saw my command line interface is not working yet. So I need to actually create a user that can access my AWS account. So I set up a AWS account that's, I've only used it for this meetup to prepare, but otherwise it's a fresh AWS account. So when you log into your AWS account, you will have no users in it besides your root user, which is your email account that you use to set up your account. So in order to set up a CLI, though, I need access keys. I need an access and a secret. So the only users that have those programmatic access are IAM users. So
And these are AES 256 keys?
no.
Oh.
Like these are just.
I said when they encrypt your S3 bucket, it's with AES 256.
Yes.
But this is different.
Yeah, this is a different piece of it. Yeah, they do have encryption keys that you can use to actually encrypt your data, but this process is just
It's more along
API
the
ID and then a secret.
identity and access.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a username and password, but generated.
So it's not like the equivalent of, say, an SSH key
Correct.
or a TLS key or something.
Right. Yep. Okay, so you can add multiple users at once, all that. So I'm going to add a user. I'll just make him an admin user and give it programmatic access. So these are two of the interfaces or really it shows all three interfaces for AWS. Programmatic access has the SDK and the CLI that I showed in the first slide, while console access actually gives access to this web page. So next, we're going to give the user permissions. So when you're working with AWS, you really want to practice the principle of least privilege, where you only give the user access to the things they need access to. In fact, I'm going to change the name of this user. I'm not going to make an admin user, because all we need is S3 access. So I'm going to make it an S3 manager.
Had my heart beating there for a second.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put this user in a group. It's better to apply policies to a group so you can reuse them more easily. I'm going to create a group, and with you Linux users, well, us Linux users, we know role-based and group access is the best way to go. And we're going to give the user full S3 access. So this is a managed policy by AWS, which means they'll automatically update it for you to make sure they always have.
So it's like you're
access.
putting that user and putting that user in that group.
Yeah.
And then that group inherits the privileges that come with it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to call this the S3 managers group. All right, so this user is now part of this S3 managers group that has this AWS managed policy of Amazon S3 full access. We're going to go set tags. We can put whatever tags we want on here. These are like key value pairs that will identify the resource. You can query by these tags later, but we're not going to do anything there yet today. And then we're going to go ahead and create the user. And then it shows you your access key ID and your secret access key right here. So it's just basically like generated username and password.
You need to save that too, don't you? So you can get
Yep.
to it. Yeah.
So you can download it as a CSV, but I'm just going to go ahead and configure my console right now. So the easiest way to configure your console is just to, your CLI, I don't want to say console. Your CLI is to do AWS configure. So it's asking for my access key ID, so I'll go ahead and pull it from over here. And secret access key. I'll zoom in a little bit on these.
And since this is being set online, this is just a play bucket you're putting in, it'll go away, so there's
don't worry.
nothing for anybody to hack when it's over with.
I changed my personal account into an organizational account and created a brand new AWS account under that account, which is going to be completely deleted after this. So you can try to hack into it, but it's going to be gone. So, all right. So now I've configured my my actual credentials with this access key ID and access key. I don't need to put in what account, AWS account it is or anything like that.
Did it automatically choose to put you in US East 1, which made sense for where we are here, but...
Yeah, by default it is US East 1, but the reason it chose US East 1 for me is because I do have the default configuration set to US East 1 already on this machine. If I were to go on a fresh machine, it might ask me which region I'm in. But US East 1 is where we are here, and it's the region we're using. You can look right up, seeing it here in global is not good. So if you go over to S3, so IAM is global, it'll work in all your regions, but AWS, oh no, is S3 down?
That would be awesome.
I think it might be down. I think it knew there was a presentation.
No, they wanted to add to the value of the presentation to show how you dealt with this.
Oh yeah, okay. I pressed refresh and it looks like it's back.
I don't know. How could it be down? Because you were in there setting up an account on S3.
Yeah, well, the way AWS is built, all these services are pretty modular and separate.
Yeah.
So if one service goes down, it shouldn't affect the others. But S3 is kind of like the storage for all the other services. It's like the foundation layer. So it can take out a lot of services when it goes down too.
Let's just say it's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. So you can find your region up in the top drop down. It's not going to show in IAM. In S3, it kind of has weird regions, which we'll talk about a little bit. But US East North Virginia is US East 1, and then Ohio is US East 2, and there's a list of these somewhere if you look up the region numbers. But the main way you can find them is just by going in this top right drop down. Okay, so we have our CLI configured, so now I'm going to try to list all my buckets in S3, just using AWS S3 LS. And I have one bucket there that I, doing this at home, you're not going to have a bucket there because I created this bucket before the demo, but just to show a response, because otherwise...
It's really cool to be able to use Linux type commands there, like the ls command. Yeah,
so this is going to feel very familiar with all these commands I'm showing you. So this bucket here I created yesterday, and I can confirm it actually exists by going to S3. But at home, when you run this, if you don't have a bucket in here, it's not going to show anything. It's just going to return. Okay, so we're going to create the bucket. So we configure the local CLI, and then we're going to make the bucket and transfer the file to it, which is actually pretty easy. So we're going to use AWS S3. All our commands today are going to start with that, except one, which will, spoiler alert, that'll be later. And we're going to go ahead and make bucket. So all these commands, first of all, I'll do this one, and then I'll show you where I'm actually, where this knowledge comes from. And we're going to go ahead and make KeyLUG meetup. It might work. We have to pick a unique name, globally unique name with S3 buckets, because they we'll see in a second, when you make a website from them, you can access the bucket through its name, and that's how they set their DNS. So we have to pick a globally unique name across all AWS accounts. So if we try to choose something like test, that's definitely going to be taken by someone, so it's going to fail.
I can't believe it has to be globally unique.
It's good though. It's a good thing.
VPC, man, it should be like
so
scoped to the VPC.
It can't be because it's based on DNS records.
Yeah, I'll show you why it can't be. The extra powers they've added into it made it so it has to be globally unique, which I like.
Extra powers, aka horribly breaking changes.
It also makes it transferable too. You can back it up to other buckets or other regions and still get to it with that same domain name.
Right. Yeah. So Microsoft has a different take on this, right? Where they, you can use names unique just to your account.
To your storage account.
To your storage account. Yeah.
Microsoft does. Is that what you said?
Microsoft Azure. Yeah.
Azure.
You don't have the global limit. You just do it based on your account.
Truthfully, it's not a huge deal because you probably want to make it kind of unique anyways if you're starting to look at like a DevOps model of creating buckets for each time you do a deployment or something like that. Like, it's not a huge deal.
It's not. You can just add a timestamp or anything to it to make it unique, and it's very easy. So yeah, this S3 MB command, I could just do AWS S3 help, and here are all the commands here.
Like their man page almost.
Yeah, exactly. So MB is one of their make bucket commands. These are all the directory, kind of like the schema level.
I'm interested to hear you discuss sync if you have that in your plans.
Yeah, I don't have it in my plans, but I was going to talk about it. Like I'm not going to use it, but I'm going to talk about the power of it in a minute. Yeah. It's different. And then managing the files is a simple, just like
all very Nix-ish type semantics there.
Exactly. So we got CP, MV, RM, and they have a lot of, they kind of operate like SCP, where you can do the local file to the remote file, or you can do remote file to remote file, or remote file to local file to transfer the files. It's just the order of the arguments you pass in. Then it has some extra powers where you can, add some wildcard filters and all this to do recursive actions. So these are all the commands available in this AWS S3 service. Should all look pretty familiar. Pre-sign is to create secure URLs to access the file. And RB is remove bucket. And sync, like I said, this is kind of like rsync, where it will compare the contents of S3 with what you have on your hard drive, and you can say sync everything from your hard drive to S3 and overwrite, or you can go the other way around. We use this in SFT gateway to provide a downloads access to your files from S3.
But it's one direction though.
It's one direction from S3 to the file system. So yeah, the way SV Gateway is designed, it uses the move command or CP command to copy the file to S3 and then deletes it from the file system because it's really meant as a delivery system. But then we added this extra power where you can set up a folder that will sync the contents back to the file system if you wanted that. But doing the move makes it so you don't have to use a lot of hard drive space to store your files. They're just going to be on S3 anyway. So that's one source of help. My go-to help is the AWS CLI docs. Which I just have open whenever I'm working in a CLI. I usually have this open in another screen. This reference is pretty good. It's the same exact contents from that help page. It's just it's a web page instead, which I prefer.
Looks like they have some examples in there too, though you could use as
Yeah, exactly.
to follow.
Actually, that's my one gripe with the AWS documentation. There's
Nah.
not enough examples.
There aren't, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
Like,
yeah.
You can see the
yeah.
progression of a command, but you kind of have to figure it out for yourself or Google other places. The
Mhm.
documentation doesn't have examples.
Well, I'll say the reference documentation is pretty bare, but if you actually go through the, open it up through here again. If you go through the user guide,
Yeah.
they're a lot better with
Yeah.
giving examples here. So even what I'm about to do is like the first example they give on this user guide. So they even talk about AWS configure on here. All the stuff I'm talking about is done through here. Now, one thing I wanted to point out real quick is I gave this role only access to S3. So if I try to use the other AWS commands, like EC2 describe instances, this will list all the instances. It'll give me a permission denied unauthorized operation. So we've confirmed that this account is limited to S3. That's the first demo. Oh wait, no, we need to actually transfer the file. So we haven't to the bucket I just made, and it's called KeyLUG Meetup.
Does it do command line completion on your S3 bucket name?
No, it doesn't do. Yeah, it doesn't do command line completion. But I'm going to show you something later that is in the works that will do that.
Okay.
It may not do the bucket name though. I'm not sure. It does do command line completion in general. And I forgot the S3 part, so I did AWS CP. But every one of these commands, it's really a two-part command. AWS is a CLI, and then you have to specify the service you want to operate on, and then the command inside that service.
That's still pretty straightforward syntax.
Yeah. Yep. Super straightforward. So it's very similar to CP. So once we get over here, it looks, exactly like CP.
Now you can list the file now, right?
Oh yeah. So let's go ahead and, we can do S3 LS, and we see the two buckets I have, and then we can do an LS on the actual, and we'll, we have to put this S3 prefix on there. If we don't, it still works. So in this particular, on LS, it knows that's always going to be a bucket, but if we were using CP, we should always have this S3 to indicate what's the remote versus the local. So here's the group.jpg, it just loaded up in there. Now if we look in the console as well, we can confirm it's there. here it is. You know, it has a object URL, but if we try to go to that URL, we'll see it's access denied. So by default, when you put a file on S3, it will only be accessible by the account owner. So only someone logged in that has S3 permissions can access this file. And it has to be through these S3 commands. It cannot be through this URL. In order to, you know, use the URL, you would actually need to sign it. You would do that pre-sign command that I mentioned earlier. So you can feel confident that your contents are not going to be accessed by anyone else as long as you didn't change your bucket to be public and all the contents in it to be public, which Amazon will warn you about now because too many developers have run into a situation where to simplify their development process, they just open up S3 to the world for read and write. So once someone finds their bucket, then that's when some data leaks have happened, which is pretty amateur. So yeah, so now Amazon, when you try to make stuff public, it will give you a lot of warnings, which we'll see later. Okay, so back to the presentation. All right, so now we're going to change this S3 bucket into a website. So a website, at bare minimum, needs an HTML file to redirect the S3 URL to, and that index.html file needs to be publicly accessible. So I'm going to go ahead and create this index.html file. Okay. And then I'm just going to make a simple one using command line. I'll make sure I get proper capitalization in here.
Darn straight. What do you think this is? AWS Columbia meetup?
That's casual.
I like how you can write straight HTML from its brain.
Oh yeah, this comes from having to teach it too many times now.
I mean, I get it. I know all those things, but I have to Google it every single time to remember this.
I have to Google security things. So let's see. Yeah, so this is going to show hello KeyLUG and then an image with our group.jpg that we just took. So I'm going to make an index.html file, and I didn't do it exactly correct. Let's see. What did I do wrong, Rob? Oh, I wasn't paying attention. Sorry.
Is it your
I
tick
have it.
marks? Like, do you need to? Is the tick stronger than the double tick? Last week.
No, there are two exclamation
Just
points
explain-
in there.
yeah.
Escape them, but you need to escape them both.
I'm just going to delete it.
All right. Yeah.
Because when I was,
Okay. Sure.
I wasn't as excited when I was practicing, I guess.
I take back my comment.
I got too excited. What is
much
it?
credit.
What is it then? What's the HTML code for it? You know?
What's wrong? Exclaim. It's be ampersand something.
All right, we're gonna look it up real quick because that's gonna bother me now that Patrick doesn't trust me.
Oh, the HTML entity for.
Oh, for the exclamation point.
Two
I don't know what it is.
Do you know, Kate? Okay. This one.
There you go.
Oh, of course. Ampersand EXCL.
Explain. Yeah.
Exclamation, right?
Yeah.
Ampersand exclamation. What's
It's
It's so
ampersand QOT is quote. I remember that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really use the exclamation point very often. Okay. I'm not so excited. So now we're going to transfer this file to AWS, but we saw, that last file we transferred was not publicly accessible, so we got to make this one publicly accessible. So we're going to go ahead and CP the index.html to our KeyLUG meetup bucket, and we're going to add an ACL option, which is the access control list. And we're going to set it to this canned ACL, which is a pre-made one that sets up the public read permission for your file. And again, it gets me like every time. Forgot the S3 after the AWS. Okay. So now our file is up in S3. We can do the S3LS. We see it here. And then we can access it after we enable static web hosting on the bucket. So we're going to use this link at the bottom to access the file. We're going to have to replace the bucket name with the name of our bucket. But it's not going to work yet because the bucket's not a website technically yet. So to enable the website, it's actually really easy. We're going to do AWS S3 website and then the name of the bucket.
Is that sort of like making it into an htdocs type folder as far as is that a little too simple,
Yeah, it's it's very simple.
HTML docs,
Yeah, it's just, you can't really specify the permissions with the htdocs or anything like that. It just has to be IAM permissions instead. But the website basically makes the bucket publicly accessible, and then we can also specify when that DNS record is hit with the HTTP port, it will redirect to our index.html, which we have to reference here. So
you're expecting some pretty quick global DNS replication.
Yeah, it is really quick.
Yeah.
So we're going to use this -- index document value parameter to put in our index.html file, so we can name it whatever we wanted, but index.html is very clear. So we have KeyLUG meetup, then index document, and we're going to go ahead and put the index.html that we uploaded. There are a lot more options with this, but this is enough to get your feet wet. So one place to find the URL is to go to the bucket's properties, and then we see static website hosting is enabled in here, and we can find the URL here. But these all follow a pattern, which is they have the bucket name, the S3 website -- and then the region name, so US East 1, .amazonaws.com. So using that knowledge, you could easily figure out what your bucket DNS is. But I can't remember what it is. So I got that, and then it was S3 website -US East 1 -Amazon AWS.com. Alright, hello KeyLUG, but the image isn't showing up. So let's see what's going on there. So we're going to open the image in a new tab, and we see that the image, it's actually still private. It's 403 forbidden. So when we ran that website command, it didn't just make all of our files public by default.
You had to do the YACL on the file itself.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to actually change that ACL on the actual object.
Is there a way to make that replicative, like you could change the YACLs on everything in a folder, everything in a
so
bucket?
You do recursive
You make it
action.
recursive, yes.
Not in a straightforward way.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so, right? Do you know of a straightforward way, Rob?
You might be able to do like a bucket policy.
Bucket policy. Yeah, so you could change the whole bucket policy to apply to all your objects inside, right?
So you're almost going to a layer above it to make it go
Exactly.
back down to it.
Exactly.
You can also just, since it's a CLI, you can do like a bash command to list all the objects
Exactly.
and then pipe that into the process of looping through and changing the policy.
Exactly. You get the programming when you get there, and if you're
That's the
comfortable with
advantage of being
Bash.
in the at command line,
Yeah.
because you can build yourself a bash script, loop that in for, X is such, done,
And then
Yeah.
You might be able to do it now with the S3 batch option things,
okay, yeah, that's true.
but that's a very, very new addition to
Yeah.
the S3 service.
Yeah, and also the way the CLI is written, it's written in Python, like I said. It's the same code that also runs the Python SDK, and Python's kind of like a first-class citizen at AWS. You can write the code in Python, and it's pretty straightforward there as well. It's very similar to CLI. So there are two S3 services on the AWS CLI if we look at this help here. There's S3, there's really three here. So there's S3, S3 API, and S3 Control. Now S3 is the one we've been working with so far, and that has a very familiar Linux feel to it. It's meant for high-level, complex commands that would actually be a good amount of work to write using straight API calls. Like they do multi-part uploads by default, and you can apply operations recursively. So you can just use star and copy all files from one system to another. And but it only provides access to a subset of the S3 API. So like we were saying earlier too, the S3 sync command is actually pretty complex. To write that yourself using just API calls would be a significant amount of work. So they provide that out of the box, and it's all inside this S3 command. But the S3 API service will give you access to the entire S3 API. So everything you can do on the console, you can do using this service here. So it requires a better understanding of S3, and it follows more the patterns of the other CLI services that you'll run into. So, but if something can't be done using AWS S3, then you can use S3 API to do it. So in this case, we want to modify the permissions of that one file, the picture file. We could do something roundabout by like moving the file and changing its name, and then moving it back to its original position, but with the ACL attached, like we did with the CP, to put up the index.html file. So if you're not comfortable with jump into the S3 API, you could do something roundabout like that, like basically make
So with
it back
S3 set, the subset of S3 itself, you can't do something such as chmod. Like
exactly. Yeah. And not yet.
But you not yet. But you could do it with S3 API.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that with S3 API.
Okay. Be cool.
So we're going to modify the ACL for existing S3 objects. And if we look at the docs, it's for this case, it's very similar and easy to use. We just need to use AWS S3 API, put object ACL, then we have to supply the bucket, we have to supply the key. The key is actually the file name, the bucket is the bucket name, and then we can set the ACL here.
There's your documentation issue there. It's key. You said the key is the bucket name. There needs to be something in that line that would say, okay, that's what your key is.
Yeah, the key is actually, yeah. So
But
key,
it doesn't say that directly. You
So
just have to know.
You have to, so if you go to, the bucket and the key properties are pretty common in the CLI, so I think they list them somewhere. Maybe not. Maybe not. But yeah,
I would be using Control F like crazy in a page like that to find.
So that's exactly right. So that's what I'm talking about right here. requires better understanding of S3. So you need to understand what keys are and buckets and how they interact. And so
It's not really weird stuff. It's just getting their language, their semantics, connected.
yeah. So the key is actually, you can consider that like the path.
It's all common stuff. It's
Yeah.
just they're calling it these different things.
Exactly. So that's why, the AWS S3 service is a lot more familiar because, you don't have to do all that. So we're going to update to the public read preset. So AWS S3 API this time, and we're going to specify the bucket, which is KeyLUG meetup.
So when you gave that your user that you're logged in under S3 privileges, that gave that user access to the S3 API set of commands as well.
Exactly. So it gave it, So I gave all permissions to all commands under S3. So the CLI is using those
It might
same.
make more
Yeah.
sense to Mark if you pull up the actual S3 full access policy.
Oh yeah, I can show you that real quick.
Because you can see all the different API commands that policy gives access.
Just to see what your options are. Let's see what you can pull from.
It's
Yeah.
like get object ACL, get this, get that, list this, list that.
Sounds like FTP or
The policies are written in JSON in AWS. In this case, we're just saying we're going to allow every operation on S3, every action on S3 for all resources.
for everything. Yeah,
So we could limit the buckets that this user could access and the actual actions. So we could say you're not allowed to change the ACL because you've made too many things public and you leaked all our data. But we need you, so we're not going to fire you.
Do
So
you mind pulling up the AWS S3 read one?
yeah, sure.
That probably will explain it more than I thought the other one would.
So read-only access, for example, is another managed policy that
There you go.
and we can see it there, or we can see the JSON where it's showing just get and list.
You can't put with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can't change the permissions. You can only
That makes
see
it
the
read
files
only, basically.
and download them. Yeah.
Read only and download.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's and if we want to do a policy summary, which is easier to read, you can see it's limited, list, read, write, and these are all the actions you can actually
Yeah.
do.
Write is not implied in that JSON that you showed a moment ago. It had, you could download and you could read, but you couldn't write to it according to that.
Exactly. Yeah. So the
But yet that lets you do it.
we can do 39 of the 84.
I don't want to put you off on a tangent here with this and lose what else you wanted to show.
Okay, yeah, these are the only write operations you can do down here
Yeah.
that aren't really writes. They're just actual get still. So anything that starts with get, it's really just limited based on the name of the action. So it's get star and list star. So the remaining 45 that we don't have access to are all shown here. So all the puts and deletes are not allowed. So we're going to go ahead and put this up there, or we're going to change the permissions on it. We're going to specify the key, which is just that group.jpg, and change the ACL to public read.
There's a lot of specific syntax you need to be familiar with to do this. You could get one, like here, you get one little thing wrong and
Yeah, I just got it wrong.
it complains at you.
Forgot to, this time I forgot the
The
second
location,
part.
yeah.
The actual action I wanted to do, which is put
Yeah.
object ACL.
Hmm.
All right, so now my object has public read access. So if we go back to,
Refresh that, you should get to it.
yeah, we can refresh this here and we can see our picture there. And then we can also go back and go to our website, which is right here. And we see our website now has our beautiful picture up there.
Doesn't need to go back and rely on the alt tag you had in the
Yeah, exactly.
image.
So the alt tag is now just part
Just
of
behind it, yeah. Mouse over it, it might show.
accessibility text. Yeah, I think we have to put in the title for that to happen. But yes. So now that was it. So we made a website using S3, and it was pretty simple, and you barely realize it happened because it was so quick, right? So now
Could you be, what,
Yeah.
what other things happened to make it actually be a website as far as like a browser would see it, and the S3 end, server end would treat it as you're turning S3 into a web server
yeah.
when you do that.
So you can
So
only
what else
do
happened?
static website hosting, though. So it's not a true web server. You can only serve static HTML and JavaScript.
No
but
PHP or
no
anything.
PHP, no
yeah.
server-side languages.
Yeah,
But-
JavaScript or anything.
Yeah, the way
Yeah.
modern applications
Yeah.
are written, though, you can build an entire single-page app using React or Angular Vue or any of those frameworks, and then you can, and those will just interact with the API. So you just build and deploy that to S3, and your single-page app is completely hosted on S3, and it just interacts through APIs to interact with your other services. So it's super simple to set up a static web host this way. And not having Apache server or something like that, narrows your attack vector, so that someone couldn't take over that web server and then get access to all your other services.
Do they say what kind? It's not Apache or Nginx or anything. It's some other type
Oh,
of
yeah.
very stripped
It's-
down.
Yeah, it's proprietary. I have no
It's
idea.
Amazon's. I just
Yeah.
pulled it up just because I was like, I wonder if it's Apache on the front end, but it responds back.
If
as
it, but
Amazon
if it were
S3.
Apache or even Nginx, it would do a lot more. It would be able to run that. But
It
that would be
responds-
to expand their computing resources,
the,
Exactly.
demand incredibly.
the
if you
response
multiply
it
that
returns
by.
back is
Yeah.
S3, Amazon S3 as the server type.
Hmm.
So they maybe they took something like Nginx and.
So this took part of their open source code and just implemented the subset of it that they wanted to do this little bit of functionality.
Yeah, exactly.
And-
So yeah, you can also set up redirects, which are very useful. We do some fun stuff with S3 where if you name it a domain, so if you name it www.thorntech.com, for example, when someone comes and hits that bucket, we can redirect to another server to actually display the page. So if we want an easy way to set up hosting, with a domain name, we usually go that way. It's really cheap. So this is really, really cheap. This is going to cost like a couple cents per month, but you do get charged per request. It's really cheap. It's like a cent per.
If you get popular, it
10,000,
get really expensive.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
could get expensive.
Yeah.
That's not a bad phone to have.
But for just a group of developers to use, then
Exactly.
it would make perfect sense.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. And you can use it. We like to use it on like enterprise apps because it's really cheap and there's only a few users using it, so it doesn't even matter.
Your own team, I mean, you've got it.
Mm-hmm. So you notice up here the endpoint HTTP. If you want HTTPS, you have to set up CloudFront in front of it, which is another topic. But you get HTTP for free. So
I mean,
on
you
the
get-
permissions, yeah.
You get CloudFront for pretty much free when you're doing
Yeah,
a
that's
static
true.
site anyways.
Yeah, CloudFront is pretty cheap too. Ultimately, that's a global CDN you can use that can use S3 as an origin. So our files are just these two. We could create folders in here and stuff to have a whole website, a whole static website. But on our console side, all we would need to do is we'd go to the bucket properties and static website hosting. There would be a button here if we didn't have it enabled, and we press enable, and that's how you would do it through the console. So if we, for example, if we disable it, it'll just look like this, and then we can just enable it and specify index.html, and then it's hosting again. Right, 0. S3 also provides encryption and versioning and all these other powers that you can explore yourself outside of the bounds of this talk.
Events is my favorite.
S3 events, yep. So yeah, events are my favorite too because they kind of open the door to serverless actions on files where you get an event that the file was created, then you can fire Lambda, or you can put a message on a queue or SNS notification, and then you can execute serverless code to process that file or react to that file, which is a really powerful infrastructure, a queuing system. Okay, so the last piece, we're just going to tear it all down. So we're going to delete the bucket, and I originally had, in this presentation, I was doing a whole EC2 instance with IAM permissions, but I took that out, so this last line wouldn't make any sense. But if you had an EC2 instance, you could terminate it at this point. It provides the AWS CLI built in, so you can start using it right away. And using IAM roles, you don't need to set up access keys. Those will be provided automatically.
But does that mean that all you need to do, you don't have to have AWS CLI installed on your local box?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
SSH into and then the AWS CLI operates from the
Exactly.
Amazon
So you
client.
could just set up
Yeah.
a little Amazon Linux,
Yeah.
a micro server, which is in the free tier. So for the first year, you can use a micro server completely for free. It will have the CLI already set up, and the Amazon Linux AMI is based on CentOS, so should be familiar. And that's actually what we use for S3 Gateway, is the Amazon Linux AMI. Okay, so now we're going to delete the bucket from the command line. So AWS S3 remove bucket, RB, and then we're going to give it the bucket name.
But you still have stuff in that bucket.
I do.
It'll let you do it?
So, no, it won't let me do it. So, an error occurred, bucket not empty, when calling a delete bucket operation. So the bucket you tried to delete is not empty. So we could, delete all the objects inside of it manually, or we can just force the deletion and it'll do it for us. As long as we don't have version files, it'll just go through and delete the files for us. So that's another, benefit of using the AWS S3 services instead of S3 API. So it deleted the files and then it removed the bucket. So now if we try to access the website,
It won't be there.
yeah, it's gone. So 404 not
404.
found.
It's gone. Yeah.
So now our bucket is deleted and that was it. So the entire website's gone, bucket's deleted, and that's it. So
Alright.
if you're interested in learning more, you can sign up for my AWS Cloud Architecting class in the fall. Carroll Community College. Otherwise, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Any questions?